Before we begin, if you enjoy in-depth House of the Dragon breakdowns, hidden details, and book comparisons, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Loreflick, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive right in. Criston Cole's story finally comes to an end. Rhaenyra gains a dreamer, one dragon rider faces a humiliating defeat, 5 mysterious dragon eggs are discovered, and the Iron Throne itself leaves Rhaenyra with a chilling cut. I never expected House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 6 to be packed with this many important details, but that's exactly what makes this world so fascinating. So, let's break down everything you might have missed. The episode opens with the updated title sequence. This time, the final shot shows 2 mysterious figures dragging someone away. These are the assassins responsible for eliminating the Gold Cloaks, something the previous episode had already hinted at. The series continues adding small details to the opening every week, and by now it's becoming clear that this season is building toward one massive war. We'll talk more about those clues as we go. Right after the opening, we witnessed the moment Criston Cole foreshadowed in the previous episode. His fate has finally caught up with him. Last episode, Cole tried to slow down the River Lords and the Northmen, known as the Greybeards, to keep them from reaching King's Landing. But instead, they outmaneuvered him, bypassed his forces, and slowly trapped his army from every direction. This was their long-awaited revenge. Cole had already accepted that his end was near. He said he wouldn't die serving someone else's cause. Instead, he wanted to face his fate as a free man, believing songs would be written about his final stand and that even Queen Alicent would hear them one day. To his credit, Cole doesn't go down without a fight. He fiercely attacks the soldiers surrounding him and once again demonstrates his mastery with the flail. Fans may remember that this is the very weapon he used to defeat Daemon Targaryen during the tournament in Season 1. After pushing back his enemies, Cole proudly shouts, "We light the way," the words of House Hightower. Even after being overwhelmed, he offers to face the River Lords leader, Oscar Tully, and the Greybeards commander, Roddy the Ruin, in single combat. But Black Aly has no intention of giving him the glorious death he desires. This is where the show closely mirrors George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood. In the book, Cole offers to surrender if his men are spared, and in return he volunteers to fight 3 champions alone. Instead, his enemies refuse. They don't want Criston Cole, the Kingmaker, remembered as a heroic warrior who earned a legendary final battle. So, rather than granting him that honor, 3 archers shoot him down with arrows. The series recreates that moment almost exactly. There's also an interesting parallel between Criston Cole's death and Jacaerys Valerian's death. Both are ultimately killed by arrows, and in both scenes the music suddenly cuts out just before the final blow, making the moment even more shocking. The River Lords and the Northmen later admit that eliminating Cole saved countless lives by preventing an even bloodier battle. That's why this event is famously remembered in the books as Butcher's Ball. With Criston Cole's death, Rhaenyra loses one of her greatest enemies. Cole wasn't just Alicent Hightower's strongest supporter, he was one of the most skilled warriors in Westeros. He trained Prince Aemond into the deadly fighter he would become, and he was the man who placed the crown on Aegon II's head, earning the title that history would never forget. The Kingmaker. Criston Cole was responsible for many of the defining moments of the Dance of the Dragons. He orchestrated the trap at Rook's Rest that led to the deaths of Rhaenys and her dragon, Meleys. The tragic duel between the Cargill twins also happened because of his plans. Later, he was appointed Hand of the King for the Greens, becoming one of their most influential leaders. But in the end, his fate caught up with him. As he lies dying after facing the Blacks, Cole pulls out Alicent's handkerchief one last time. She gave it to him in Season 2, Episode 3 as a blessing before he left for war. Looking back, that moment almost feels like the beginning of his final journey. Criston Cole's story ends with a surprisingly simple yet powerful conclusion. He remains one of the most complex Kingsguard in A Song of Ice and Fire history, both admired and hated. A huge amount of credit goes to Fabian Frankel, whose incredible performance brought Criston Cole to life on screen. He perfectly captured every side of the character, from his loyalty and determination to his pride and flaws. In A Feast for Crows, Jaime Lannister and Loras Tyrell even discuss Criston Cole, describing the Kingmaker as a man remembered as both the greatest and the worst Kingsguard to ever wear the white cloak. That single conversation perfectly sums up his complicated legacy. As for Black Aly, I mentioned back in my Episode 1 breakdown that she would become one of the most important characters during the later stages of the Dance of the Dragons. This episode is just another reminder that her role is only getting bigger. Meanwhile, Alicent and Helaena, who became trapped inside the secret passageways at the end of the previous episode, are finally found by the castle guards. What's interesting is that Alicent still has no idea Criston Cole is dead. There's another clever parallel here. As I pointed out in my previous breakdown, These are the same secret tunnels Rhaenyra once used to enter King's Landing. Back then, they represented freedom and choice. But now, when Alicent uses those same passages, they become a trap with no escape. It's a subtle way of showing the difference between the two women. Rhaenyra has always had the freedom to make her own decisions, while Alicent has spent most of her life bound by duty, responsibility, and the expectations placed upon her. The episode then shifts to Rhaenyra's small council meeting, where Daemon explains everything that has happened in King's Landing. Interestingly, Daemon turns out to have been right from the very beginning. He warned that the City Watch needed to be paid properly, and he also advised Rhaenyra to ignore unnecessary insults instead of responding to every accusation. Now, the consequences of ignoring that advice are becoming obvious. Many members of the City Watch have abandoned their gold cloaks because no one wants to risk their life without being paid. At the same time, Rhaenyra's public responses to criticism have damaged her image among the small folk, making her appear increasingly out of touch with the people she's trying to rule. On top of everything else, Daemon brings up a controversial strategy regarding Tumbleton. He argues that the Hightower army should be destroyed with Dragonfire before it has the chance to grow even stronger. From a military standpoint, Daemon is absolutely right. Later in the episode, Ormond Hightower openly admits that he's counting on Rhaenyra not attacking Tumbleton. He believes she doesn't have the resolve to burn the town in order to wipe out the Hightower forces. And the truth is, he's correct. Rhaenyra doesn't want to massacre a town that has already surrendered, and most members of her small council share that opinion. Daemon is one of the few who believes victory should come before mercy. Because of that hesitation, Ormond is able to continue his campaign and strengthen the Green's position. To justify his argument, Daemon compares the situation to Aegon the Conqueror's Field of Fire, one of the most famous battles in Westerosi history. During Aegon's conquest of the Seven Kingdoms, King Loren Lannister of Casterly Rock and King Mern Gardner of the Reach joined forces with an army of nearly 55,000 soldiers, around 5 times larger than Aegon's own force. As their massive army advanced across the open plains south of the Blackwater, Aegon and his sisters took to the skies on their dragons. What followed became one of the most devastating moments in Westeros history. The battlefield was consumed by Dragonfire, the mighty House Gardner was completely wiped out. Around 5,000 soldiers were killed instantly, another 10,000 were horribly burned, while the Targaryens lost only about 100 men. That legendary battle became known as the Field of Fire, and it's even depicted in the show's opening sequence, where you can spot dragons attacking from both sides along with the sigil of House Gardner. However, Rhaenyra argues that Tumbleton and the Field of Fire are fundamentally different situations. The armies at the Field of Fire came prepared to fight. Tumbleton, on the other hand, has already surrendered. Burning a surrendered town would be a massacre, not a battle, and that's a line Rhaenyra refuses to cross. Ironically, that's exactly what Ormond Hightower is counting on. His plan is to stall long enough for more allies to reinforce the Hightower army before Rhaenyra is willing to make a decisive move. Even so, Rhaenyra finally begins taking action elsewhere. Representatives from House Baratheon arrive in response to the summons she sent to Storm's End. But this isn't just another diplomatic meeting. Rhaenyra had specifically summoned Lord Barros Baratheon, the same lord who received her son Lucerys Velaryon before his tragic death. Lucerys had gone there to remind House Baratheon of the oath they swore to support Rhaenyra's claim to the Iron Throne. Instead, Barros ignored that oath, and the events that followed ultimately led to Lucerys being hunted down and killed by Aemon Targaryen. That's why Rhaenyra's anger toward House Baratheon feels completely justified. The Baratheon representative explains that Lord Barros is currently away fighting the Vulture King in the Red Mountains. Interestingly, the Vulture King isn't the name of one specific person, it's a title traditionally used by Dornish rebel leaders who operate from the Red Mountains. The first Vulture King appeared during the reign of Aenys I Targaryen, the son of Aegon the Conqueror. The one Barros is fighting now is actually the third leader to bear that title, continuing a long tradition of rebellion along Dorne's borders. There's another important development involving Lord Barros Baratheon. While Rhaenyra is trying to bring him to her side, Ormond Hightower has also reached out for his support. Right now, Barros is searching for Prince Aemond, because the alliance between House Baratheon and the Greens was built on the promise that Aemond would marry one of Barros' daughters. The big question now is whether that marriage will actually happen or if another Targaryen, like Daeron, will end up taking Aemond's place. Although Rhaenyra doesn't get the chance to confront Barros directly, she cleverly uses his representatives as part of a plan that could seriously disrupt Daeron's campaign. It marks one of Rhaenyra's first major offensive moves, and it almost succeeds. The only reason it fails is because one knight makes full use of his experience and battlefield instincts. We'll get into that in more detail a little later. Now let's talk about the two new dragon riders, Ulf and Hugh Hammer. The two of them are taking turns patrolling outside Tumbleton on the backs of their dragons, Silverwing and Vermithor. If If you noticed how those dragons interacted with each other, there's a reason for it. Vermithor and Silverwing have shared a special bond for decades. They once belonged to the longest reigning king and queen in Targaryen history. Vermithor was written by King Jaehaerys I, while Silverwing belonged to Queen Alysanne. The books even mention that these two dragons were deeply attached to one another, and the show beautifully reflects that connection. What's even more interesting is that throughout their entire lives, each dragon has accepted only two riders. Vermithor was first ridden by King Jaehaerys and now by Hugh Hammer, while Silverwing was first bonded to Queen Alysanne and now to Ulf. Earlier in the season, Hugh confirmed that he is the illegitimate son of Princess Sarah Targaryen, making him a descendant of the royal bloodline. Now let's focus on Ulf. This episode makes it obvious that becoming a dragon rider isn't exactly what he expected. Before claiming Silverwing, he spent his days bragging in taverns and dreaming about the life of a hero. But now that he actually has a dragon, he's forbidden from returning to the city, and reality is far less glamorous than he imagined. His humiliation just keeps getting worse. Earlier this season, Daemon slapped Ulf during a private conversation in front of Hugh. This time, Daemon humiliates him publicly in front of the people of Fleabottom. He even warns Ulf that if he ever sets foot in King's Landing again, he'll lose his eyes. It's a harsh reminder that despite riding one of the most powerful dragons in the world, Ulf is still treated as someone beneath the Targaryens. But there's a limit to how much humiliation anyone can take. No matter how cowardly or inexperienced Ulf may seem, he's still a dragon rider. He now possesses the same kind of power that allowed House Targaryen to conquer and rule Westeros for generations. If he's pushed too far, the consequences could be enormous. There's another detail hidden in this scene. While Daemon is publicly humiliating Ulf, a young woman witnesses the entire confrontation before quickly leaving the area. Sharp-eyed viewers may remember seeing her in the previous episode in Fleabottom, near the aftermath of the attacks on the City Watch. This strongly suggests she's working as an informant. After witnessing Daemon's treatment of Ulf, she likely carries that information to Ormond Hightower, giving the Greens valuable intelligence they may be able to use against Rhaenyra in the episodes ahead. How the Greens might use this information is something book readers may already have an idea about, but we'll have to wait and see how the show handles it. Now let's shift our focus to Hugh Hammer. Unlike Ulf, Hugh isn't just patrolling the skies outside Tumbleton on Vermithor. He secretly enters the town disguised as one of the locals to reunite with his wife. But instead of a joyful reunion, he's met with disappointment and frustration. If you remember the events of last season, Hugh lived in King's Landing with his wife and young daughter. During the blockade, like many of the city's residents, they struggled to find food. The shortage eventually claimed the life of their sick daughter. After that tragedy, Hugh's wife needed him more than ever. But when Rhaenyra called for dragon seeds to attempt to claim dragons on Dragonstone, Hugh left to answer that call. Believing she would never see him again, his wife assumed he had died. With nowhere else to go, she fled to Tumbleton to live with her brother. But now Tumbleton is under Ormond Hightower's control, and life there has become just as difficult. She's suffered even more losses, including the death of her brother. That's why Hugh's return doesn't bring her happiness, it only reminds her of everything she's endured. She also refuses to abandon the rest of her brother's family, especially after they risked their own lives standing up to the Hightower soldiers to protect her. Now Hugh faces a painful reality. Everything he's done so far was meant to build a better future for his family, but instead, the people he loves have only suffered more. It'll be interesting to see how this affects both Hugh and his bond with Vermithor moving forward. Now let's talk about the mysterious blue-eyed man. Despite the nickname, his most striking feature isn't really his eyes, it's the way he speaks. When Daemon, disguised as a gold cloak, tries to draw him out, the stranger calmly responds that we're countless. We're everywhere. He also refers to Daeron as Daeron the Daring. That's an interesting detail because, in the books, Daeron earns the title only after proving himself through a major event. Here, however, people are already calling him Daeron the Daring, suggesting that his reputation is growing even before his greatest achievements. So who exactly is this mysterious man? The episode itself is titled Faceless Men, and the blue-eyed man's confidence, mysterious nature, and calm way of speaking immediately remind many fans of Jaqen H'ghar from Game of Thrones. The Faceless Men are legendary assassins who serve the many-faced god. They're known for eliminating their targets without leaving behind evidence, making them one of the most feared organizations in the world of Westeros. At this point, the show hasn't confirmed that the blue-eyed man is actually one of the Faceless Men. But if that theory turns out to be true, and if Ormond Hightower has secretly hired them to spread chaos throughout King's Landing, it could become a serious turning point in the war. The stranger's words, "we're everywhere," only make that possibility even more intriguing. Now let's move on to Ormond Hightower. Wayne Hightower arrives at Tumbleton after leaving Criston Cole's army at exactly the right time. In the previous episode, Wayne mentioned that he often let Ormond win when they were children. We've also seen how poorly Ormond reacts whenever things don't go his way, painting the picture of someone who's always expected victory. Now Gwaine comes to warn him because he believes Ormond is making a dangerous mistake. Ormond is underestimating Rhaenyra. He's convinced she would never order a dragon attack on Tumbleton, and that confidence could easily become his greatest weakness. Unlike Ormond, Gwaine understands that underestimating your enemy is one of the fastest ways to lose a war. Another subtle detail is Darren's behavior after Gwaine arrives. His attitude noticeably changes, suggesting that he understands exactly what Ormond is doing. Rather than blindly agreeing with every decision, Daeron seems to be following Ormond out of necessity instead of complete trust. Gwaine also proves his value almost immediately. When Rhaenyra's disguised Baratheon representatives arrive, he's the one who recognizes that something isn't right, preventing the Black's plan from unfolding as intended. A true knight is expected to recognize the warriors of other great houses. We've seen this before in Game of Thrones, where Jaime Lannister could identify famous knights on sight. That's exactly why Gwaine immediately realizes that Rhaenyra's supposed Baratheon representatives are imposters. Until this moment, Ormond had been ignoring Gwaine's warnings and treating Rhaenyra as a weak opponent. But the moment he realizes she's already making bold moves against him, his confidence quickly begins to fade. It shows that Ormond isn't as fearless as he likes to appear. Gwaine, on the other hand, has real battlefield experience. He understands when it's time to fight and when it's time to prepare for the worst. That's why he suggests returning to Old Town. If Ormond falls to Dragonfire, House Hightower will still need someone alive to rule. Now let's talk about Rhaenyra and why this episode hints at the possibility of her becoming a harsher ruler. After Alicent and Helaena tried to escape, they're placed under much tighter guard. Alicent also reveals that Helaena is pregnant. This creates an interesting moment for Mysaria. She already knew about the pregnancy but chose not to tell Rhaenyra, suggesting she may still be trying to protect the Hightowers in some way. At the same time, she exposes the maid who helped Alicent and Helaena escape, making her loyalties more complicated than ever. During Rhaenyra's council meeting, we also see how difficult ruling King's Landing has become. When one advisor reports a shortage of tallow, the oil used for lamps, Rhaenyra simply tells him to speak with the Master of Coin. Then a scepter reports that, because there aren't enough city watch guards, a young woman from her mother house has been abducted. Rhaenyra responds by saying she'll light a candle and pray for her. It's a response that feels surprisingly weak. The people aren't looking for prayers, they're looking for protection. That leads to the biggest question of the episode. Who will keep King's Landing safe now that the City Watch is falling apart? As I mentioned in my previous breakdown, without the City Watch the capital is destined to descend into chaos. No matter how many Valyrian soldiers Rhaenyra brings in, replacing the City Watch won't be easy. Then comes one of the episode's most symbolic moments. The Iron Throne cuts Rhaenyra's hand. In Westeros, there's an old superstition that if the Iron Throne cuts its ruler, it means the throne itself is rejecting them. We saw the same thing happen to Viserys in Season 1, but the symbolism goes even deeper. The Iron Throne was forged from the swords of Aegon the Conqueror's defeated enemies. It's meant to remind every ruler that the throne is dangerous and that ruling requires calm judgment, not emotion. When a ruler loses control of their emotions, the throne has a habit of reminding them. Viserys was cut while grieving his son and arguing with Daemon. Now Rhaenyra is wounded after becoming overwhelmed by problems she can't immediately solve. Whether you believe the superstition or not, the cut represents the enormous pressure she's now facing. The real question is how this moment will affect Rhaenyra's mindset and the choices she makes for the rest of the war. However, Alicent unknowingly gives Rhaenyra one of the most important pieces of information in the entire episode. She notices that Helaena has once again predicted Aemon's location through one of her visions and tells Rhaenyra that Helena's dreams always come true. For Rhaenyra, this changes everything. Back in Season 1, Viserys revealed that House Targaryen possesses two extraordinary gifts. The first is the ability to bond with dragons, and the second is the rare gift of dragon dreams. Daenerys the Dreamer foresaw the doom of Valyria, allowing the Targaryens to leave for Dragonstone long before the catastrophe. Later, Aegon the Conqueror dreamed of the Song of Ice and Fire, a prophecy about a terrible winter that would one day threaten all of Westeros. That vision became one of the reasons behind his conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. To the Targaryens, the power of prophecy is just as important as dragons. The secret of these dreams was never shared with Alicent or her sons. It's a royal secret passed only from one ruler to their chosen heir, which is why only Rhaenyra truly understands its significance. Now the question is, how will she use this knowledge? As for Alicent, she's already been forced into choosing between her own family and the realm. Now Rhaenyra sends her with an assassin to locate and eliminate Aemond, a major departure from the events of the book. That decision also means Alicent must leave Helaena behind in King's Landing, even after revealing the truth about her prophetic abilities. Before leaving, Alicent shares a heartbreaking conversation with her daughter. Helena quietly asks whether no other lord had ever asked for her hand in marriage. It's a devastating moment because Helena has never wanted power or politics. She loves nature, prefers solitude, and simply wants a peaceful life. Instead, Otto and Alicent used her marriage for political advantage, leaving her trapped inside the Red Keep. Her father rarely paid attention to her. Her mother was often distant. Her son is gone, Aegon is no longer by her side, and now, while pregnant, she's about to be left completely alone. It makes an earlier moment even more tragic. In Season 1, Rhaenyra proposed marrying Jacaerys to Helena, but Alicent rejected the idea. Later, during the family dinner, Jace invited Helena to dance, and for a brief moment, she genuinely looked happy. Sadly, that may have been one of the last truly joyful moments of her life. Before departing, Alicent promises Helena that she'll return as soon as she can. Meanwhile, as Rhaenyra struggles to solve the growing crisis in King's Landing, Aegon shows another side of his character. When Tyland suggests fleeing to Casterly Rock instead of traveling to Essos with Larys, Aegon asks a surprisingly simple question: am I a terrible man? Tyland can't answer. That silence tells Aegon everything he needs to know, and he ultimately decides to leave with Larys, continuing one of the most unexpected character arcs of the season. This is a huge moment for Aegon's character. For most of his life, Aegon surrounded himself with people who simply agreed with everything he said. But now, he's beginning to realize that the people who tell him the uncomfortable truth are the ones he should trust the most. It's a quality we also saw in Viserys, who always valued honest advisors over blind loyalty. Now, Aegon finally seems to be growing as a ruler, and with that decision made, he sets off for Essos alongside Larys. Meanwhile, Daemon's daughter Rhaena remains hidden in the Vale, hoping to reunite with her sister, Baela. However, Lady Jane Arryn quickly reminds her that revealing herself would put both of them in danger and expose their secret to Rhaenyra. Baela's storyline also takes an unexpected turn. After sharing a few scenes with Adam in the previous episode, this time she grows much closer to Alan. It feels like a surprising development, especially since the show hasn't spent much time building up their relationship. Compared to the books, where Baela is portrayed as far more adventurous and free-spirited, the series is clearly taking her character in a different direction. Elsewhere, Aemond wants to leave without Vhagar, but Rhaenyra has already placed a bounty on him. At the same time, Alys Rivers keeps his location hidden and reveals something that no Targaryen ever expected to find inside Harrenhal: 5 dragon eggs. This is one of the episode's biggest mysteries. These eggs are believed to have been laid by Dreamfire, the dragon once ridden by Rhaena Targaryen, Aegon the Conqueror's granddaughter. Rhaena spent the final years of her tragic life at Harrenhal, where the small folk eventually began calling her a witch, just as they now call Alys Rivers. What's fascinating is that these 5 eggs are never mentioned in Fire and Blood. The books only mention the 3 eggs stolen by Alyssa Farman from Dragonstone. That makes this discovery entirely new for the show's story. Aemond even notices that the eggs still feel warm, something that shouldn't be possible after so many years. Since dragon eggs are traditionally placed beside Targaryen children to form a future bond, this discovery may even inspire Aemond to imagine a future and a family with Alys Rivers, something he never seemed interested in before. Now the real question is, how will that future collide with Rhaenyra's plan to send an assassin after him? At first glance, this episode may not have looked action-packed, but it was easily one of the most information-heavy episodes of the entire season. Nearly every scene planted important clues that could completely change the course of the Dance of the Dragons. For me, Gwaine Hightower was the MVP of the episode, and hopefully his story is far from over. If the next episode continues setting up the conflict, there's a good chance episode 8 will finally deliver the massive battle we've all been waiting for. Now I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think Helena's future looks like? What will Alicent do when she finally confronts Aemond? And how do you think Rhaenyra's next move will shape the war? If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Loreflick, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next House of the Dragon deep dive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.